going to be a tough act to follow, right? If we must mess it up, I think someone else is to blame. Good afternoon, welcome back, and we'll continue with our conversations around disruption, Industry 4.0. What I'll do is give you a quick 1 minute rundown on some of the overarching thoughts that we will spend time deliberating upon. We have a very eclectic set of very accomplished professionals from the resourcing industry, from large global enterprises in the chatbot industry, and plus our good old friend Kannan from the e-commerce sector. So it's a veritable mix of organizations. But let's first get kind of dive straight into it. Does this work? Yes. So first, let's understand, and we talked about this since morning, and I think Raji, you were mentioning about transformation in business models. The biggest shift that's happening, and we're talking about the client side of things, is that companies are moving from traditional old school standardization systems to very, very focused organizations that are having global footprints, co-creating, building growth and resilience. And at functional level, they're moving away from siloed interfunctional transactions to actually, having entire cross-functional collaboration, and that's where the shift is happening, and the pressure is on vendors to also go from the left to the right. Meanwhile, from an operations standpoint, the traditional triangle of people, process, technology is being upended. I think Raymond can attest to that, that's where the primary commencement of automation is really putting the disruption and the spanner in the works. But there's a much larger piece to the puzzle. It's how do you transform people at that bottom pie, hollow out the bottom as they call it, and make them and convert them into cognitive individuals where you still leverage transact people and process with technology in an effective manner. That's the fundamental shift in business models that is happening. Right? It's happening at the client end, it's happening at the vendor end. Meanwhile, the digital transformation itself, the life cycles to transformation have been shrinking. And I know Manoj just talked about the Industrial Revolution 1 through to 4, from a 100-year transformation cycle to less than 2 years that we are today a part of. It is putting the pressure on every single element in every single value chain. So what we do today may become extremely irrelevant or obsolete in around 2.5 years. Meanwhile, there's something else happening with the workforce. We are having to contend with a non-biological workforce alongside a biological workforce. Now, an interesting side fact which we will not discuss is that there are at least 16 governments who are currently considering taxing chatbots because they're treating them as workforce. Now, we will not get into that, but if anybody wants to say something, please feel free to do so. So you and I are having to contend with that combination workforce. And I think Rajesh talked about augmenting. Let's try and understand what that augmentation means versus full-fledged replacement means. Meanwhile, the future of work that people are talking about, all of us are a part of this. It has nothing to do with millennials or the old people, maybe I'm somewhere in between. There is a confluence of virtual and real worlds. It is creating a certain behavioral changes within organizations, amongst individuals. There is work motion. We talked about the millennials. We talked about the fights between Gen Y and Gen X and Gen Z, and a whole lot of behavioral changes. We are moving from traditional workforce to contingent workforce to distributed workforces. But we're also dealing with borderless boundaries. We would like to call ourselves as part of a globalized world, but unfortunately we've got more boundaries coming up with respect to trade and business than we've ever seen in the past 50 years. So that is the state of affairs, and what we will try and do is to delve into each of these areas as we get through the next 45 minutes. Is that okay? Alright, so my first question to you gentlemen is take 3-4 minutes and provide your broad perspectives on the topic at hand. It's about leveraging people, process and technology in today's world to create sustainable impacts. Are you starting to do?
People, process, technology. Before I start, there's a 27, just on Raymond's point earlier in the day, there's a 27.2% chance that I'm a robot. Probably not, but I'll move on. People, process and technology for me, I'd like to reflect on a meeting I went to earlier in the year, and it was with a bunch of, it was an association of mechanical engineers, and it was a company representing those. And we went into that meeting with them and also a bunch of higher education institutes. And then there was a scattering of us observers. And the meeting was about graduate outcomes and the fact that the graduates who were making their way to these mechanical engineering, on the first instance, they're saying, well, we have to now invest another 2 years in these graduates before they're work ready. And so what can we do to work with new higher education institutes to make it that we only have to invest 6 months, or that they're work ready as soon as they come out of the institute? And so we went through the process, we went through the curriculum, we went through the learning environment, and then we came to the work experience. And the work experience, the internship, the cooperative learning. And we went around the room and we said, so how many graduates do you take, each of you companies, how many graduates do you take per year? And we went 7, 5, 12, 11, so on. It's okay. How many interns do you take every year? 5, 2, 7, 4. About 30, maybe 70%. There was never 100% breakover there. So then we said, so what's happening when they're out in your workplace for the experience? And the response was, well, they're in the office. They're obtaining knowledge about our administration systems, they're obtaining knowledge about how we operate. So are they actually out in the manufacturing areas? No, they can't. Why not? Because if we put them in the manufacturing areas, then there's too much of a risk of something going wrong. So we reflected on that a little bit, and we said, well, if you're not providing them the experience prior to them coming onto your workplace, then how do you expect them to have the experience as soon as they get in there? So then we started, and this is where the technology bit comes in, then we started exploring how technology can improve that or help that experience. So we talked about mixed reality, virtual reality, augmented reality. And we talked about creating simultaneous simulations of high consequence, low probability scenarios, and creating those in a work environment or a virtual environment that expose the students to those scenarios. That was one we explored. Another was, because we were there with an association, and each of those companies were competitive, they still were all challenged with the same issue, which was graduate employment. So we established that there could be a pre-prod environment that they would all share, where the students would come through that one environment. All of the companies would share that. We would make sure the capacity is high through the use of technology. And we would also make sure that we're sharing the results of those students, the outcomes, the assessments. And we're not just assessing at the end, we're assessing all the way through. So what that's doing is it's using technology to not only get you to an outcome of graduate employment, but what you can do is you can start doing some workforce planning 2 to 3 years in advance, because you know what the skills are that are coming in the future. And so that was a good example, I thought, when I saw the 3 words in the topic, a good example of how technology can get you to a point of an outcome through a collaborative discussion like that. And we got to those outcomes.
Yes, thank you, Bobby. People process technology. I think as we speak about Industry 4.0, indeed it provides us with lots of opportunities, lots of exciting technology that can be used to redefine the way we play, the way we work, the way we consume. When it comes to the people, I think we've spoken quite a lot this morning about automation and some of the threats. I don't believe that a lot of jobs will be displaced. I think there will be some. Essentially, if you look at what constitutes a job, it's a combination of a number of tasks. Not all tasks will go away, some will. And then we need to look at what are the skill sets, what are the new skill sets that are required by the workforce of the future. And in doing so, there's basically a responsibility both at the individual level to constantly do continuous learning, as well as the organizations that they belong to upskill them, right? So I think Tim did a good job in terms of illustrating how some practical approaches can be done by industry to help their workforce get these new skills. Having said that, I would also contend that education, in the STEM education specifically, also needs to be abreast of the new technologies that are coming up. But also, let's not look at Industry 4.0 as purely tech. There's also a lot of new jobs that does not exist today that are going to be existing in the future that are not going to be tech in nature, but supporting the new Industry 4.0. So that's a little bit on the people side. On the process side, I think if you just take an example of automation again, I would contend that we should first look into what should be automated and what shouldn't, right? So I think, it's not to automate everything just because it can be automated, because you might create other new sets of problems. So I think that assessment needs to be done by companies before they go into a long-term automation strategy. Process by itself needs to be improved before any automation happens, because if you automate a poor process, you're actually compounding a problem. You're just magnifying it. Technology, I think all of us here in industry, as employees, employers, we have a responsibility to, again, understand what we are faced with. What are these technologies? What are the advantages? What are the downsides of some of these emerging technologies bring us?
Your views?
Right. I'm actually quite happy the fact that the fellow panelists actually started off by looking into people, the importance of people. There's a lot of times when we talk about industrial revolution or automation, we often look at the aspect of technology and process, and then the last bit would be always the people level. But along the way, we forgot that it's also important while you're automating and improving your processes. It's the infusion of people, on upskilling people, is a huge responsibility to the business leaders to make sure that the people are also ready. So whenever you're automating, right, you're not going to automate 100% of the process. If you want to remain true to your core company's value or remain relevant to the customers, there's always a gap that is left behind that cannot be managed by the automation. And this is where you need people to step in and really help you out to manage those exceptions. And this exception prevails in literally any organization's IT. And in that sense, to say RPA or process automation is going to take away your workforce, I don't think it's going to happen in a large scale. But what's going to happen is that you need to keep on upskilling your current talent pool to make sure that they're relevant to the current trends.
Wonderful. So let's take each of these pieces by point, process, people, and technology. I'll come to people at the end because we tend to get stuck with people when we start with people, and we will not move forward. So let's start with process. So question number one is workflows, right? We talked about processing environments moving to intelligent workflows. Having said that, a lot of the forward-looking companies are actually asking their vendors for outcomes that they don't really care about those intelligent workflows. So my question to you is, would you believe in the next 5 years, this term process will completely disappear from our lexicon? And we may not really have to bother about establishing a structured, sequential, linear way of getting from point A to point B. I want each one of you to take a shot at it.
I really liked one of the previous speakers where they talked about the BPO moving to a new office, and they actually went to step 2, step 3. They didn't worry about the as-is from where they're moving from. And that's exactly what's going to be happening. And we also mentioned earlier about the fact that the millennials, they're not being disrupted in any way because they have to have been using the technology to start with for them to change. That's going to happen. That's going to take time. I'm in higher education, so we're working a little bit slower in that process. So the as-is for us is going to remain something we have to be very cognizant of, continually with our own technology. But I certainly think that that leapfrogging and taking advantage of the fact that our younger staff don't have a legacy, and they can leapfrog into a new solution immediately and actually leave the rest of us behind, which is fabulous. We should be looking to them to help us tell us what's next, because I think it's still a bit of a top-down scenario, and they're learning a lot more purely by utilising the technology day to day, and we should be really utilising that.
That's it. Well, your views?
Sure. So I think technology process further is still going to be relevant in the future. I think it sets the blueprint of where we want to go, from which point. But I think in the future, we probably would start with what is the outcome, what is the experience that we're trying to achieve. Yeah? And we may leapfrog a couple of steps. If you have a 10-step process, maybe all it takes is 2 steps in the future. So if you look at some of the things that are happening in 4.0, at a component level, if you take manufacturing, for example, at a component level, components are speaking to each other. They are no longer static components. So if we look at a 10-step manufacturing process, right? Let's take an example of a automotive car plant. Today, the way technology is, if there is a product recall, you may have thousands of cars being recalled, right? But with the technology that we have in place in the future, compounded with cloud and big data, the defect level can be traced to a component level. At the component level, it can be then tied to the actual number of cars that are manufactured at that specific time frame, right? So in terms of the recall rates, it's not going to be mass recalls. So that's an example where technology that we are going to have is going to be able to help us. I still think process is relevant.
Kannan, your views, if you like to kind of articulate it from the standpoint of e-commerce, right? We've got issues in the e-commerce sector, vendors complain, and of course the entire life cycle supply chain seems to have enough room to work. Do you believe that the current process is perhaps inhibiting, or is it what customers want? Could you break it apart and rebuild it?
Right. In terms of the word process itself, I don't believe it will vanish over time, but the perspective of looking into it might change. Okay, so just to give you a bit of an example, I'm the kind of person who understands what my team is doing day in and day out. So I literally know all the processes, but it has reached a point that I can actually forget about it because the system is taking care of them. Right? And processes are automated. So in that sense, I only need to step in and the system tends to break. And I don't need that level of granularity that I need 3 to 4 years ago. And the team does not need to know as well, unless when there is a problem, then they need to step in to manage those. Having said that, also the fact that in terms of managing processes, like going back to the exception that I mentioned, one of the key challenges in the e-commerce space is actually fraud management. So when you look at fraud management, you want to make sure that you optimize your revenue, at the same time you want to control your fraud. At the end of the day, there are 2 reasons for it. One is the obligation towards the payment vendors, trying to establish a good credit risk profile, and also the other one is to also look into monetary loss. And when you do that, when you want to automate a fraud process, you can actually automate it up to a level of 95, 96%. At the end of the day, you still want to review the remaining 4 to 5%, and from this 4 to 5%, it needs manual human intervention, which then will come up to about 98 or 99 or 99% of approval rate, which 1% will get stopped, just to make sure that you actually keep your fraud levels under control.
That's how we have progressed as humanity over at least the last 100 years. To the point, the mega trend that Anush talked about in the morning, N equals to 1, R equals to G, and actual co-creation. Would there be an opportunity, or do you see that we will not get to it at all, that we essentially eliminate ourselves from the shackles of processing and sampling and the law of averages completely and say, let's go down to brass tacks. You talked about components. You talked about isolating a single component in a single car, so I can recall 1 car and not a million cars. Could we get to that scenario?
I think with machine learning that is definitely possible, because as time goes by, the machine gets intelligence by itself, through feeding them different scenarios and data, right? With machine learning capabilities, I think this is definitely possible.
So, the question for the GBS Index therefore is, the service providers who are offering services to customers, right, whether it is to yourselves or to large companies like a bank or anyone else, Do you believe that the service providers will need to really upend their entire view to offering their services to actually come to at least 50% of that sophistication? And if so, what should they be doing now? Any one of you can take shot. Got it? You? What should the vendors do to be able to come to a point of sophistication that the clients will trust them to give them customized services at that component level, for example? Today we have mass customization, right? We offer transaction processing services or application maintenance services. So one size fits all is right customization. Could we get to that point of component side?
Yeah, I think everything we are going to be doing that's going to be seen as high value in the future has to be customized. It needs to be personalized, customized, specific to that customer and the industry, according to their aspirations, right? So easier said than done. I think it all comes down to the core of the business. So as a service provider, who are your clients? What industry are you specializing in? What do you want to be known as, right? So I think it comes down to also not just being able to tie the pieces of the technology, but also looking at the framework of the processes that you're building, the customer experience that comes out at the end of it, and also the sustainability. Will this process still work, 12 months down the road? So you get, as a business, will I get the ROI from these investments as well? So the short answer to, or rather long answer to the short question, I would say technically it's possible. From a business standpoint, it is a strategic decision companies have to take. If we go on a one-size-fits-all, you're not going to create that experience at the end of the day. So I would like to think that some of the both large and small organizations, I've seen large organizations that have done a lot of specialization in specific verticals and have done very little customization for the second and third clients. So they've done a lot of that investment upfront. I've also seen some of the smaller startups also do this level of customization, and it starts with a purpose. Right? So the company goes out for a specific market and targets itself, puts all its resources into being a niche player. It will have a better chance of succeeding.
So you're saying that most vendors will have to upgrade their business models, primarily?
Yes.
So what should their goals then be? Because today's goals are premised in the back office. And partly, to use that for your point, large organizations tend to invest in their clients' functions, and therefore they may have some level of intra-functional goals, but they're not necessarily taking accountability for the client's business outcomes. Do you believe that it is time for vendors to take that leap of faith? And if so, how should they do that? Anyone of you think?
Absolutely, yes. We've certainly transformed our business from being a software selling business to being a solution, and we go in with business outcomes. And that's because of the technology allowing us to do that. So previously we just built a software system and then that's delivered. Now we put that on the cloud. We then have an analytics capability. We have the ability to provide them with an end result. And we go in and ask them what the end result is, and we're able to deliver that. So the result is not actually just being able to say this is your software. The other thing we do is we get very close to our other vendors who are also delivering in the same environment, so higher education and extending beyond that. And so we like to go into our clients and say, well, let's talk about what we're doing, and then be able to convert that conversation to, well, you also need to be speaking to this other vendor. We don't get a clip out of that, but we'd like to be able to go in there and provide capability beyond our own solution, because that strengthens our own conversation. But it also means that the client, when they come and see a vendor like us, they know that they're going to get a view that's not just us trying to sell them something. And I think that's where the vendor-client relationship has moved from. We're no longer just trying to sell them something, we're building our own credibility in the market through the conversations that we have. And that's what I see my role as actually knowing everything about the sector, not just my own particular point of interest.
At this point, may I just ask for a show of hands in how many of the service providers in this room are essentially flipping their business models to intelligent workflows? Any show of hands, please? One. So no one here? So the panel recommends that all of you flip from traditional processing transactions to intelligent workflows. Please engage them. I have an introduction fee. Okay, let's move on. Let's come to technology. We'll take that in two parts. One is let's understand automation, right? And I will give you my views. I'm very passionate about this and a little bit angry sometimes. We have seen to take in transactional automation technologies which are essentially about operational efficiencies, and we have paraded them as the next best thing that seems to have happened to humanity. And we have given it a fancy title called artificial intelligence. I believe we are far away from the true benefits and the true realization of AI. Most of it is sitting in laboratories across the world. But it's a great and sexy marketing term. Where we are at today is automating transactions, and to Bernard's point, we're automating a couple of tasks and not an entire job. We may end up automating roles altogether. So we are bringing operational efficiencies, speed and agility to our clients, to our own businesses. That's the current take in the marketplace. However, it is a very unsexy conversation. So my question to you all is, do you agree with me that we are at that level of sophistication with technology? And if you choose to disagree, please do state your views as well.
Maybe I can relate it to an example. Right? So if you are someone who shops in Zalora and you have actually had an experience of returning the item, and today, over the last 2 months or so, if you were to return the item and provided that all the stakeholders, all the touch point works well and it reaches our warehouse, you'll be able to get your refund if you paid by credit card and PayPal within 5 minutes, automated. Okay, so we have actually reached that level. But if you want to notch it up further and really trying to leverage on artificial intelligence, what I would like to foresee is basically using customers' previous behavioral model where they actually have to book the returns online and select the refund method, and using that and really identify the refund method the customer prefers. And if there is an opportunity to identify the information of the bank details, and that will really help because our business model has a huge component of cash on delivery and online bank transfers. So I think that's one good example of application of AI, and probably we can actually do a lot more after establishing that.
That's my question. Is that transactional automation at its highest levels of sophistication, or is it real AI?
No, I don't think so. There are a lot more rooms for us to really take it up further. At this moment, it's very transactional and it's building operational efficiencies.
So to your point you made on the data that you get from the customer behavior, is it still a one-to-one data packing, or is it a one-to-many?
It's pretty much one-to-one at this moment. Yeah.
So there is still a lot of room. So if it becomes a many-to-many, I think Manoj made that point that is keynote. It has to be a many-to-many. And a substantial amount of customization to get to that n equals 1, then we could possibly say that we have reached level 1 of AI. So you agree with me?
Correct. And really looking at the data network in the sense that there are also a lot of infusion that you can actually put into it. Example, marketing team can step in and really look into, okay, this customer has been opting out and cashing out for like 3 times. What can we do to really get the customer to stick with us, and really pushing like other refund methods like wallet credit that we have. So those sort of things is really something that we can actually look forward.
Essentially what it's saying is that by automating the basic transactions, which are essentially sequential actions, we are now in a position as organizations to start focusing on a little bit more important things like analyzing data, analyzing behavior, and establishing some predictive behaviors for consumers so that we can respond accordingly or build products accordingly.
Correct. So I guess it's also the time that we move up the value chain already.
What are your views?
Yes, similar views. I think if you're talking about the level of automation that's happening in the masses today, it is still at a transactional level. Having said that, I've been involved in a few projects where we've gone beyond that, but those numbers are very much smaller. For an example, an insurance company that engaged us, we did some transactional claims processing. However, we took it a step further to also ask the question, what would it take for us to be able to do approvals of claims without any human intervention? So we looked at some of the low-hanging fruits, about 30% of the claims, where using analytics combined with automation, with an accuracy level of 99.5%, we're able to actually automate that. So obviously during the POC, we still had people doing a forward check on that. However, the results were very encouraging. So I think I see that as the future.
You're also complimenting that. You're still not got to the levels of AI that we see to be brandishing around. Your views, mate?
We're so early in the AI that it's not even a pinprick on the map of where it's going to take us. I think the first step, I was just reading about this during the week. I used to cringe going into meetings in my corporate world, and we used to go in there with technical architects, and they had this title and came with them an aura of lots of whiteboard clouds getting written on a board and saying this system is going to connect with this system, and they're going to have a unique identifier so we can have the data running all the way through the systems. Thank goodness now it's called a data warehouse, and we all know about data warehousing. Thank goodness now that AI has come along, because we're no longer being exposed to the architects coming and drawing lots of clouds on the whiteboard, which is a good thing. What's happening is we're now being moved away from the term data warehouse, we're now calling it a data lake. And the data lake basically means just get all your data. It doesn't, first of all, you don't have to have a single solution that delivers everything. Microservices delivering various functions throughout your business is okay. What you can do is you can bring all the data relating to each of those microservices into what they call the data lake. Because artificial intelligence now has the capability to bring that data and associate the data automatically. So no longer do we have to have the unique identifiers following that piece of data all the way through the workflow. We can use the AI to decipher that data and turn it into aggregate data across the whole business. Now we're so early in that stage as well, but the fact that we're now just bringing our data into one location, that's the first step. And so that's the first step in many for AI, but the fact that we're getting that as being a first step, I think is really positive. And if you ever get the opportunity to work on a project like that, really embrace it, because it will change your business, maybe not immediately, but certainly in the future.
So the second element of technology, this is extremely pertinent to the GBS sector in particular, not as much to startup world, because the young mobile organizations with probably 300 employees. We sit on hundreds of thousands. Zoom was just mentioning there are 5,000 jobs already, trying to drop to 14,000. I think Malaysia totally employs 120,000 people in this sector. The industry across the world is about 9.5 million people, about $1.5 billion of business. This is a pretty sizable sector. It has created substantial socio-economic gains for many developing nations. The biggest challenge, you all agree with me, that transactional automation is eating away at the lowest level of jobs, right? And most of this GBS sector, essentially at this current moment, thrives on that low-level types of jobs. All of us in this room, don't worry, right? And some of us have taken the leaps of faith in essentially cannibalizing our revenues, but only on the back of a client requirement, so as not to upend their entire business model. This is a real challenge for vendors. The customer might say, I don't care, automate everything, or you lose the client. But for the vendor, it is not as easy as flipping the switch. So what would be your recommendations, at least the top 3 recommendations, where service providers can remain in context, within the context of the changing technologies, yet morph their business models from where they are, which is butts on seats, heavy models, to a combination model where technology is appropriately used alongside humans? I think this is an extremely pertinent question for everybody in this room. Also for government. So please, your thoughts on that. Start with you.
I will fall back to the comment earlier about the fact that we are called on by our vendors, or by our clients, to give recommendations. And our clear recommendations is you can't do everything at once, right? You need to take this as a methodical approach and take off, try and achieve what you can within a period of time, but don't try and overachieve because you'll fail. So you need to be preparing your clients not to fail. And in many ways that is to push back on the comment, we want to automate everything, because doing that will potentially make that business fail. And so people come to us for recommendations on what's achievable, and we feel that we give that information back. We give smart technology, but we're not going to try and transform your business, because we're still dealing with people having to adopt this new technology and this new change. And whenever there's people involved, it's going to take time. If you are dealing purely with technology, replacing technology, go for it, right? But when there's people involved, you still need to be considerate of a workflow and a time scale on that. So I would love to have it fully automated, and I know the client would love to have it fully automated, but you've got 40 or 50 people in the back room who potentially don't want to have that automated, or have a small resistance to change, so you need to take that into account.
This kind of raises a question which is more for governments, but a lot of developing world governments are beginning to push back on large organizations who are pushing for automation, because it has a socio-economic impact on the nations, right? Countries who are looking at creating jobs. And if companies like us are unwilling to create jobs for just the revenues, it doesn't sit very well with policymakers. But that's a conversation for a different panel. But your views?
Yeah, I think my view is basically, let's not look at automation for automation's sake, but in terms of what we're trying to achieve with automation and within what time frame. So again, based on Tim's what we mentioned just now, it's always going to be a balance of risk and reward. There's also, so to start with, without your client telling you what to do, I would say that I would look at a specific piece of work that's currently being done and define how can it be better done with or without automation, right? So when I say without automation, it could even be as simple as a process improvement before you start automation. Automation itself, we have different levels of automation. We have assisted automation or unassisted. What I mean by that is, if you find a process that can be automated end-to-end, that's unassisted level of automation. If you're talking about augmented automation, it means that there is humans that are sitting in between that end-to-end process. So it could be a few of the steps are automated and the other few are still dependent on humans. So I think we have to tread this very carefully. Start with low-hanging fruit. Start with proof of concepts. Ensure that it's stable before we automate more, and redefine your market. Once you have automated successfully, you don't need to look at your market as Malaysia for Malaysia, right? The world is your market.
Right, so when it comes to automation, I always fear of people losing their jobs, right? I guess between 100 and 150 people in this room, we would be very successful in putting 5,000 to 7,500 people out of the jobs in the next 5 years by virtue of automation. That is a fact. But along the way, you have also an opportunity to really transform your current workforce to be the proponent of those automation. And like what I mentioned just now, you don't have to see this as a Malaysian company and doing something that is only for the local market, but you actually have global access when you have real expertise. So, for example, when I talk about the refund process just now, it was a project that is completed by the Malaysian team. But then again, when it was so successful, it was also replicated to countries like Philippines and Indonesia. And from that point forward, it actually gave us the kind of agility and the knowledge to also replicate a few other processes. So we, within the organization itself, became a sort of like center of excellence for process improvement and automation.
We've got just a little time left, so before we flip the audience, one question on people. We will not delve too much into it, so quick answers. Contingent workforce. Right, we've moved from traditional jobs, roles, employment to contingent workforce. Some of them are all the way through, some of them are half the way through. Do you believe that is the way of the future? Do you think that's what people want? Multiple loyalties, but outcome-centric workforce. Do you think that's the way of the future and GBS industry should possibly consider it?
The gig economy, right? So the gig economy is thriving, and it's only growing. And as you say, it's outcome driven, task driven, and anyone can do it. I think there's an absolute work for it. The other thing is, we mentioned earlier about the shared office space, and that is really thriving as a result of the gig economy. People are able to carry out tasks in a location for an employer very, very far away. So I truly believe that's emerging and going to be the way of the future.
It's the same, right? I think there's already it's here and it's thriving. There's already a lot of platforms out there that actually brings this marketplace to buyers and sellers. So it is already happening.
Hello?
Right. In terms of the future workforce, I think the term that Rajesh mentioned just now, hybrid employees, it's quite reflective on my title if you notice. Right?
Yeah.
So two completely different portfolios sitting together. Also the fact that I started off in Zalora as managing the regional contact center, but as the time passed by, we noticed that the operations are pretty stable, and we don't really have much room of improvement there. Right? We have actually deployed chatbots. We've actually come up with all the channels that we wanted to service the customers. And then I told my boss, maybe it was a mistake, but he said, okay, since you went bored with this thing, let's add 2 more portfolios into your current role, and you look after the customer experience and payments. So hybrid employees is where one employee is going to serve 2 or 3 functions in future, and I guess that's going to be the trend.
Wonderful. Great. So let's flip to the audience. First is I want to ask anyone in the audience who has got experience in cannibalizing the revenues to just say a few words. Anyone, please? Has anybody been able to cannibalize the business model from being purely butts on seats heavy to a combination of people and technology and automation? I think as one small example would definitely work very well. Anyone? Or should I pick somebody? Any examples? Okay, never mind. I think the man who has an example doesn't want to say anything. But any questions, please? Any questions? Any thoughts, any perspectives, any disagreements? You've got some time. You're all completely clear of the impact? Yes, please. The microphone here.
Yeah, basically on the last question was brought up, which is outcome-based, effective people hiring, people-centric. GE did that years ago with Jack Welch, where projects, people were assigned to projects and they were literally almost didn't have a job when the project was over. My question to us is, that all sounds right, but we still have the emotional component to worry about, the loyalties and the people. So no matter how much robotics comes in, human beings are still going to be in the equation. How do you balance these two? How do you work the issue of the human nature, not just the cold cut, sorry, this is concentric all over, up next. How do you balance those issues, please?
You could also ask them to go away nicely with the party as well. But any views, please?
Right. As an organization that embarked on the automation and consolidation over the years, I believe we always try to avoid the route of a major downsizing or retrenchment exercise and rely heavily on natural attrition is one, and second is also upskilling them to be prepared to become the subject matter expert on those automation and also serving other countries within the group itself. So this is what we have done. Back in 2013, I was managing a team of 120. Today the team is about 70 plus. And what happened over the years was also natural attrition, and these people actually moved up the value chain to become project managers, not just managing a very focused segment of projects, but broader expert. So a person who's managing customer experience today could also be managing logistics, fulfillment, on all those things.
That's something to say.
I think we're breeding our graduates to be prepared for that, and in fact the attention span is less on a task now than maybe it was when our parents were going to university and so on. So, and we personally are quite a progressive company, and we're very aware that there's multiple tasks and one person can carry out, but also that we can draw on staff from around the world that have particular expertise for a period of time. I think it's here. I think there is certainly an emotional element. And this gig economy that I mentioned, it's still going to be a very small percentage of the whole employment. What I think it's saying is it's emerging, and it's emerging much more than maybe what it was 5 or 10 years ago. In fact, it didn't even exist then. And applications such as Airtasker and Airbnb and so on are feeding that economy.
Wonderful. Any other questions from the audience? No? All right, right now we have 1 second. Are we out of time? Thank you very much. Please join me in giving a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much. Thank you.